Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly virtual discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Wiam Nemu, and today our guest is Martin Manna. Hello, Martin.
Wiam, so great to see you.
It's good to see you too. I know you're very busy, so we really appreciate that you're making the time to connect with us. And we're honoring this month Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And he was a great activist, and you've been a great activist in our community. We'll share how in a little bit, but I'm going to share your bio. So you're the president of the Chaldean American Chamber of Commerce, which seeks to represent the estimated 25,000 Chaldean-owned Michigan businesses, and the Chaldean Community Foundation, which provides social services and acculturation to more than 40,000 new Americans annually. Publisher of the Chaldean News, a monthly magazine distributed to over 10,000 Chaldean households, and manager of the Ark Angel Fund, Martin is involved in several civic and community affairs and organizations, including New Detroit, Advancing Macomb, Ford Macomb Hospital, Michigan Advisory Committee for the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, and the Oakland County Land Bank. Wow, Martin, our previous guest last week, similarly to you, you guys are fairly young. So when we are sharing this, or I am sharing this information, I'm seriously impressed. I know sometimes because I've worked with you with the Chaldean News since 2007. So sometimes I'm focused on the work that I'm doing as I'm writing this, and then I don't see all these other things that you're involved with. So how did these organizations get started and expand to the degree where they've expanded today?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Wiam. We launched the Chaldean American Chamber of Commerce just 20 years ago. We're celebrating our glorious 20-year anniversary this year. And it was really founded by a gentleman by the name of Sabah Hermes Summa. Sabah wanted to get a group of individuals together from the community and formed a steering committee in which I was a part of, along with about 20 other community members, to address the inconsistencies that existed between understanding what a Chaldean was and with our business owners doing businesses in places like the city of Detroit. We had an image issue more than anything else. People didn't really understand what the Chaldean community was, the contributions we made, and we needed an organization that could be the voice of the business community. So 2003, as 20-year steering committee, helped formulate the chamber. We had about 15 founding members that paid $5,000. And today we've grown to an organization that encompasses many other organizations like the Chaldean Community Foundation, the Chaldean Chamber PAC, the Ark Angel Fund. We operate with about 80 employees and an annual budget of about $20 million. I can't hear you for some reason. It's like, there you go.
Yeah. So like I said, what I was saying is this is very impressive, but you probably already know that my favorite of your businesses is the Chaldean News, because as a writer myself and having contributed to the magazine since 2007, which I gotta tell you has been an incredible journey for me. I tend to be overly nerdy and just like to stay behind my computer. And I remember when we met and you said, do you want to write for the Chaldean News? So I thought, okay, I don't know, do I want to really get out of the house and, meet with people? But it's been an amazing experience because I got to learn so much about the community and the wonderful and their achievements through these people. It was on a personal level. It wasn't just through books and what have you. So how did you get involved with the publication? Because this is, again, like for me, it's so important. And also I think for our community, because it's allowing for us to document our modern history.
Right. So I, like many other young people at the time, back in the late 90s, early 90s, was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career. I remember a career day in high school, and it talked about doctors and lawyers are some of the highest paid professions, and I knew I didn't want to do that, so I became a stockbroker. I did very well in my first few years at Payne Weber, which is now UBS. Took a lot of money to join another firm. I was very young, and here I was in my early 20s with about $1.5 million that I had raised, or was able, to invest. And during that time, because my parents were so active politically, my dad, was always a journalist. He published El Muntada and Hadaf papers here locally, and also worked for the paper in Baghdad. We had that background, but my mother was also involved in the church and in the school districts. So I was always at a community element to me. Well, while I was working at this brokerage firm, I lost $1.5 million. I lost an additional $500,000 on top of it. I was broke. I had just gotten married. I really was seeking direction from God at that time, and helped form a company called Interlink Media with Tony Antone and Mike Sarafa. And that was my job for first few years, just trying to figure out what I could do. We did some association management. I used to actually help run the Greektown Merchants Association. And then we sold ads to a lot of ethnic publications, including the Arab American News, the Latino Press, and some of the others. And then we had come upon the Jewish news, which we thought our community needs something similar to this, and met with Gary Torgo, who's still a prominent leader in the Jewish community, who introduced us to Arthur Horowitz. And from there, we launched the Chaldean News, almost as a mirrored or a replica to what the Jewish community was doing. Rather than a weekly paper, we did a monthly publication, but wanted to just tell our stories. We had brought in Vanessa as a partner, so the four of us were starting the publication. She was the editor, and eventually, after several years, Tony had dropped off, and the three of us, Mike and Vanessa and I, continued the publication until, as the print industry started slowing down, and we wanted to make sure we were continuously telling the stories of our pioneers, our communities, archiving our history. The Chaldean News was eventually sold to the Chaldean Community Foundation, in which I am the president of, and I serve as publisher of the Chaldean News. So the story here is I was chasing money for quite some time, and I got burned, and actually followed what I was most passionate about, which is community work. And that led to the establishment of the Chamber, the Chaldean News, and many other institutions, including the Bank of Michigan. A few of us had started a bank because we knew that there was challenges with members of our community getting loans, and we wanted to have a Chaldean-style bank.
So Martin, as you know, I've met with your dad. I've written an article about him, and it was just so touching because he was a journalist, like you said, in Iraq, and some of the things that he said were so heartfelt, and he had witnessed many things over the years as a journalist. Just if you want to, what was one thing that you got from him that you have used in your journalism career, or you think it's important, especially nowadays when I feel like freedom of speech is kind of being threatened to a certain degree, or there's a pushback on that. But you were not born in Iraq, but I was, and I know the value of freedom of speech. So what is something that you learned from him? Because I know when I interviewed him, he left me with so many quotes I remember that I took, and his importance about telling truth. And that's what the journalist's job is not to be afraid to tell truth. What is something that you feel like stands out for you?
A couple things really. You talk about, I still enjoy seeing my dad as much as possible, just because of the stories that he continues to share with us, and the education that he brought to us. He was very educated and made sure our family was educated. 5 of my brothers and sisters were born in Baghdad, the last 3 of us here in Detroit. But 2 things really stuck out for me. One is courage, right? My dad really never succumbed to the pressure of the Ba'ath Party. He spent most of his life writing about the human rights violations of the Ba'ath Party and then Saddam Hussein. And, that takes a lot of courage, because a lot of people here didn't necessarily always agree with him. And the other part is integrity. You talk about truth. We were taught at a very young age, and it's something that has always been instilled in us, and it's how we run our organizations here in the Chaldean community. We under promise, we over deliver, but we always tell the truth. We have the highest level of integrity. And, if you always start telling the truth, you never have to remember, and you'll never get in trouble. I mean, that's there's a adage that says truth will set you free, and that's absolutely true.
Yeah. And now I know, probably aside from his wisdom, I think part of why I connected so much with him is because my dad was like that. He was very educated, and he wasn't afraid. He didn't succumb to the Ba'ath Party and said what was on his mind. And that's why he knew it was very urgent for us to leave the country.
Right, right.
So, the community over the decades has witnessed some challenging times, some locally and others in our ancestral land. What would you say were the most difficult ones, and how did you, as a leader and activist, get involved in them?
Well, the chamber was born in 2003. It was the same year the U.S. invaded Iraq. And that is what kind of moved us to start the Chaldean Community Foundation. While we were a business organization, we knew we needed to have an entity that could provide human and social services and advocacy to the persecuted, mainly to our brothers and sisters in Iraq. And the foundation is probably our greatest story when you talk about why the chamber was launched. Here we are in providing services to more than 40,000 people annually from 48 different countries of origin, and making sure that we're putting our community and new Americans on the right path with English learning, access to transportation, career services, resume writing, job placement. We do immigration services. We're working on immigration reform. We help more than 1,000 clients with intellectual or developmental disabilities. We have a behavioral health program, an early childhood program. We teach citizenship, and many other programs. I mean, the Chaldean physicians provide free access to health care. We give out loans in the name of Michael J. George now for people to buy a car to get to and from work. We've just broke ground on a $30 million affordable housing project. And so it was the invasion of Iraq and the subsequent actions that took place with many of our people being displaced is the reason why the foundation was started. But in addition to that, under the previous administration with President Trump, there was some deportations that took place. We, along with some other organizations, really rallied with our congressional representatives, the ACLU and others, to try to stop those deportations. It's one thing to deport people. It's another to deport them to a country in which you just claimed there was a genocide committed against the same people. But a lot of our work, I think, more than anything, though, besides those two items, has been education. People didn't really know what a Chaldean was when we started these organizations, and many people still might not, but they know that we are a community that contributes immensely to this region. And we went back to the beginning where people didn't really understand us, they didn't really like us, to now saying, how can we get more Chaldeans to come to the state? So I know we've been doing some good work there.
Yes, I can vouch for that. I know that, again, as a journalist, I was invited to sit in many meetings, many even private meetings, when delegates came from Iraq, from Washington. And I know that after the 2003 war, in between, there was the bombings of the church in 2010. Between that time and 2014, when ISIS attacked, you had so many meetings at the foundation and at the chamber to kind of really try to see how to protect the people that were still in the minorities, the Christians, particularly Chaldeans, Assyrians, that were still in Iraq. So I saw that with my own eyes, and I saw the complications, but there was such an attempt. There was a serious attempt that was being made. And unfortunately, what happened in 2014 did happen. But we'll talk a little bit about, I know that you recently went on a trip to Iraq, so we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But before we get to that, what would you say are the major misconceptions people have about the Chaldeans? Because what you just said now is that people didn't know our name. And I think also people had a certain misconception and stereotypes about us, that yes, your organization and people who then I think the newer generation is helping change that. By the way, when I was trying to do a cultural project, and I was reaching out to different places to find different Chaldean foundations around the world. And I found that the only one that was really the only place that had an established organizations Chaldean based was Michigan. And, and I, based on what you just said, that's how it was started. It was started by you guys. And I thought, wow, that it makes so much sense that we have so much power here, and that the people can even help the people back home based on all the work that you guys had previously. But the misconceptions, what are the things that you had to work to kind of, to change that? And what were they too?
Yeah, good question. I mean, initially, even today when I go to Lansing, the first thing people that say to me is like, oh, I have a lot of friends in Dearborn. So I always love to explain that the Middle East is a very diverse place, that we're not all Arabs. We have quite a history there, a unique culture, a unique religion, language. So people just had some misconceptions about people from the Middle East in general. I mean, they all assumed we were Arab and Muslim, number one. The other thing that often came up is, that we only own liquor stores, and there was really nothing else to the community. They didn't understand our history, our background, the persecution that took place within the community over the various, over centuries. And so those misconceptions led to other challenges, I think, that we had to address, mainly in the city of Detroit. I mean, you talk about Chaldean and African American relations. There was just this mindset that Chaldeans were just given stores, and that's why they were business owners, and they were taking advantage of their African American customers. So these are all items that we had to address. And one of the things we did as a chamber, as a foundation, is we launched a Chaldean survey, because we knew if we could tell people that, and people from the Middle East, this we always want to exaggerate. So I wanted to have a university that would back up our research to say there's this many Chaldeans here, and this is how much they contribute. And in 2011, we did a survey, and then we updated in 2017 with the University of Michigan Dearborn, initially with Walsh, that talked about 160,000 Chaldeans here that contribute almost 11 billion to the economy, that own some 25,000 businesses. Easy stats that I could just say, oh, by the way, this is not Martin saying this is the university, right? And so we know that data is very important, and I think our numbers are much higher. So Walsh College was just commissioned again by us, and we're updating those numbers. So in a couple more months, I can hopefully tell you that there's maybe, hopefully 200,000 of us here contributing X amount of dollars. Those items are important, right? Because it goes to a much more global type of issues that arise when you talk about immigration. We want more Chaldeans to come here if the U.S. will allow it. We still have a few 100,000 displaced throughout the Middle East. Why shouldn't they come here? I mean, for the grace of God, just for the grace of God, had our parents never left, would we still be around? Would we still, where would we be at this point? And so they should have that same opportunity. And so this data is important, but it also helps break down these stereotypes. We've done a lot with the general media on addressing those issues. Hasn't always been easy. It's been contentious at times, but we enjoy doing that. The other thing, just like you do, there's not a month that goes by that we're not doing several cultural competency trainings for area school districts, corporations. Just the school district around the block from us here in Sterling Heights is 70% Chaldean. And so we become advocates, activists in these municipalities to make sure that they have Chaldean representations in their government, in their school districts, so that our people can feel welcome. And they don't have to call us for every single issue, but rather go to someone that looks like them, talks like them, acts like them.
I mean, the amount of work that this takes, all the details that you're saying. I know sometimes people can look at something and it looks like a building and they have no idea what you guys are doing, the in and out work. And I've been in the building many times, and there's all these people working regularly, aside from the ones that we don't see. It's really amazing, and the people that understand that really appreciate it. Because you were born here, I'd like to know that growing up, what was your relationship to your homeland that you have this kind of a passion and willingness, because like you said, you got involved in something else and then, okay, it didn't work out, but still you have to have some kind of a feeling, some kind of root for you to do the kind of work that you do. And it's successful not because of the money aspect of it, but there is a passion there that is the driving force. So
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out, I really am, because but
you're like, how
but
did I get involved in this mess, right?
now, look, I always tell people, we live here in the U.S., but my heart really is in Iraq, and it's funny because my four children, like sometimes I'll put on a song that's Kulthum, and I remember when I was very young, riding in my dad's car and listening to all these wonderful Arabic musicians and singers. And, that kind of stuck with me. My dad's advocacy work, his activism, my mom's volunteer work with the community. I think that's what kind of in this direction. I mean, you go back to the Manna name. There was a bishop by the name of Ajin Manna that wrote the first Syriac to Arabic dictionary. So there's quite a history. And, I think we all have some destiny here. And, I'm still trying to figure that out. But I seek wisdom and direction from God all the time. And this is the path that he's given me.
And I think your dad wrote a book about the bishop, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
He did. Yes. So you recently visited Iraq. Why did you visit, and what was that experience like?
Well, we wanted to do more to try to support the community in Iraq, but this specific trip was because of Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin had told me that there's going to be a congressional delegation visiting Iraq. And is there anyone specifically, a Christian leadership, whether it's political or religious, that the congressional delegation could visit or should be meeting with while they're in Iraq? And then if I had the opportunity to also, go along on the trip. And so I took advantage of that. I went because of the U.S. congressional delegation that was there. We had an opportunity to meet with many of our religious leaders, mainly in the Nineveh Plain, and also our political leaders, the mayor of Hamdaniya, the mayor of Tilkef, those districts, and then the mayor of Al-Qosh. And so I was in some of those meetings, but we also took a broader delegation of some of our chamber members and board members and other leaders in the community that wanted to see firsthand. We got to spend a few days in Amman, but most of our time was in Iraq in the northern part and a few days in the villages in the Nineveh Plain. And so our work was to provide advocacy. I could tell you clearly, now that as an organization, we have 2 contractors that live in Al-Qosh that work for us full time, doing work for us and trying to implement specific plans and goals to help the community there. We're trying to duplicate the services of the Chamber and the Foundation in the Nineveh Plain and have a long-term goal to create an administrative unit so that there's self-administration, something that already exists in Iraq, but we're trying to stop demographic shifts, looking for local policing in our community. We're trying to stop any harassment or intimidation. We want equal. We've created a new logo that's called the Product of Nineveh, and are now going to be marketing and selling products made in our ancestral villages here in the U.S. We are also working on digging new water wells in places like Karemlesh, Tilkef, Bakofa. And so there's plenty of land there for agriculture that could feed the entire Middle East. And we're starting a microloan fund program for them to give them loans that are guaranteed by our members here and help them, really create commerce. But the long-term goal, is to give them self-sustainability, reliability. How can they continue to live peacefully and coexist with the Kurds and the Arabs in their ancestral land? I'm going to Washington, D.C. next week and maybe meeting King Abdullah. He was recently on CNN and talked about the need for Arab leaders to help promote, protect, preserve Christianity throughout the Middle East. And we're going to be asking him if he would host a summit of other Arab leaders and help allocate resources and dollars from the Arab world to help rebuild the Christian villages that were destroyed by Daesh.
Well, I was going to ask the next question. I almost feel like you've answered it. I was going to ask from your observation if it's feasible for the Chaldeans, Assyrians, and other minorities to remain in Iraq. But based on how much work you're putting into it, so you guys feel that there is that possibility, because you're not working on it alone. It seems like the Arab community as well is interested in the same thing.
Yeah, I just worry that we might be too late. That what was most painful to me, when we visited Iraq, and it got very emotional for many of the people that are on the trip with us, was that most people there said that if they could leave, they would. That they don't really see a future for Christians in Iraq. And we went to some very nice places like Ankawa and Hook, and it seemed that people were doing well. But there's a lot of tension. Our areas are disputed still between the Kurdistan regional government and the central government. Every day we're getting reports that there's some imams that are still, reliving the past about ISIS and Daesh. There's still some of those sleeper cells. People don't trust their neighbors. There's a lot of reconciliation that still needs to be done there, unfortunately. They don't have hope, but our mission has been that as long as there's one member of our community there, we're going to be working hard for them.
Oh, wow. That is very touching, really. And the fact that this attempt, whatever attempt happens, it doesn't only help Iraq, but I'm sure the Middle East in general, with having minorities there, which is, I think it would just be so much helpful to the Middle East, because as we see here in the United States, diversity does work. It does build better communities. So what you're doing is really wonderful. We only have like a few minutes, and I really want to talk about your future works. What future work are you doing for the Chaldeans locally, as well as now you just mentioned internationally, unless there's other things that you're doing? But what is it that you're doing locally specifically?
Yeah, we have a lot of exciting projects. I mean, we currently are going to have about $50 million in new construction. We're creating an affordable housing development in Sterling Heights, about 135 units. We're going to dub that new area Chaldean Town 2.0. We have a plan to maybe create 500 new affordable housing units. We just purchased a school in West Bloomfield, and we're going to be converting this 45,000 square foot facility as another headquarters for the chamber, and also to provide some additional support for the work we're doing at the foundation. The new facility will house Bishop Ibrahim's library to help preserve all of the manuscripts that have been they were trying to destroy in places like Mosul. We'll also do some programming there to help preserve the identity and culture of the community and its writings. There'll be a radio station. We'll be moving the Chaldean Voice Radio there. We'll also do a podcast for the Chaldean News, and we're creating Chaldean News Television there. The facility will also have a business incubator and some dedicated space to help support our efforts in Nineveh. And so those are exciting projects. We're also working a little longer term on a senior assisted living home. There hasn't been any quality compassionate care that we've seen for our community. We feel as a nonprofit, we could provide better care to our seniors, and frankly, they deserve it. So a lot of new projects on the horizon. In addition to the chamber celebrating 20 years, we have a full year of great activities going on. So stay involved, stay connected. We'll keep you updated on all the things that we're working on.
So, Martin, is that a charter school that is going to be in the West Bloomfield, or what?
It was a previous school. We're just renovating it to be a new headquarters.
It was a previous. So the whole building is going to be the new headquarters. Yes. That will incorporate everything that you just mentioned.
Correct.
Wow. But the housing is going to be here in the Sterling Heights, and then the others. So
we also have some additional housing planned for Farmington Hills.
Wow. That's a lot of work. And, I know that we're running out of time, but just one last thing, what advice, because really what you're doing is incredible, and you do give, you help dispel stereotypes just by what you're doing. What advice would you give Chaldeans in general to, make their dreams come true and just kind of, just be themselves, but then to be so productive like you're being right now? What's the advice you'd leave them with?
Well, there's a couple of things I always tell people, especially in our community. Don't hate, participate. And the other is always to follow your passion. If you follow your passion and you enjoy the work that you do, the money will follow. you have nothing else to worry about.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Martin, for coming. And see, that's why I'm so appreciative of you making the time. Look how busy you are. Thank
Look
you.
at you, man. We love you, Thank
Thank
you.
you. We love you too. Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful day.